I'll turn it over to you, Jason.
Thank you, appreciate it.
How is everybody today? Good. So my name is Jason Penrod. I'm founder and owner of Family Elder Law, and we have 3 locations, one in Lakeland right across from the Polk County Theater on South Florida, and then one in Lake Wales and one in Sebring. And what's different about our firm is that we specialize in solving problems for seniors and families as they accompany the challenges that come with aging. And so whether it's planning for long-term care, someone having to go into a nursing home and trying to figure out how to pay for that, or trying to plan so that you can have care in your home, we try to tackle those challenges head on. And we have a geriatric care manager on staff that helps as we go through the process of trying to find that care. And we do estate planning and things like that, but our focal point is basically to make sure your lifetime needs are met. And so, if anybody ever has questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I won't bill you, just for that first call. It depends on how long it takes. No, that's not true. But appreciate having the opportunity to be a sponsor here today. It's my pleasure to introduce Brian Haas, the state attorney for the 10th Judicial Circuit of Florida, including Polk, Highlands, and Hardee's counties. I've had the pleasure of practicing across the street from Brian for quite a few years, and his reputation precedes him and is very well. Everybody in the community thinks well of him. He was elected state attorney in 2016 and was reelected in 2020 for a term continuing through January 2025. As state attorney, he is responsible for all the criminal prosecutions in the 10th Judicial Circuit. Mr. Haas has 90 attorneys working for him as assistant state attorneys in his 5 offices throughout the circuit. Last year, the state attorney's office handled more than 11,000 felony cases and 20,000 misdemeanor and criminal traffic cases. Prior to being elected as state attorney, Brian Haas served as an assistant state attorney. During that time, he prosecuted crimes ranging from misdemeanors to capital felonies, including the prosecution of cases where children were victims of physical and sexual abuse. Mr. Haas was raised in Polk County and graduated from Bartow High School. In 1997, he graduated from Flagler College, and in 2000, graduated from the University of Florida College of Law. Brian and his wife live in Winter Haven with their 2 children, and they are very active in their church and community. Now, please welcome Brian Haas.
Thank you. It's really good to be with you today, Sean. And I appreciate you taking the time to be here. And for the folks that are going to watch this eventually on YouTube, welcome. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the state attorney's office, what we do, how we do it, and then focus on a couple of things. One, how COVID-19 has impacted our operations at the office and at the courthouse in general. And then some things that I see coming down the road as far as where we go from here and moving our cases along. And then touch on very briefly a couple of the other issues that have been going on in our country, in our state, and our county this year in 2020 as far as law enforcement and people in our community and things like that. And then I'll take any questions if you have any. So it's my responsibility as a state attorney to take all of the cases from law enforcement, and that's in 3 counties, Polk, Highlands, and Hardee, and determine which cases can be prosecuted. And once we determine the cases that can be prosecuted, how do we handle those and what do we do with them? So that means we're getting cases, thousands in a month. And if anyone thinks that COVID has made the criminals stop, they haven't. They have held true to their reputation. We still have people committing crimes, no matter what's going on in our country. So we'll get thousands of cases in a month, whether they're misdemeanors or felonies, and we're responsible for prosecuting everything from shoplifting at a store all the way up to first-degree murder and all the cases that come in between. So it's my job to field a team of prosecutors to handle those cases and do the best we can with them. So it's a high volume operation, a lot of moving parts, and we have 5 offices in our 3 counties, but our main office is in Bartow. So in a typical case, we'll get a referral from law enforcement. Say the Lakeland Police Department makes an arrest, they'll complete their reports, send it to us, and we have 21 days to make a filing decision. So that means in that time period, we've got to get all the documents, we've got to analyze them, talk to our witnesses potentially, talk to law enforcement, and make a filing decision. And then it starts to move. We file the case if there's enough evidence there, and it gets assigned to one of our trial lawyers. And then depending on what type of crime it is, what kind of record the person has, and all the circumstances of the case, then we determine what has to happen with that particular case. You may have seen a recent article in the newspaper that talks about first-degree murder cases. Unfortunately, in our Polk County office, we have quite a few pending murder cases, and those are cases that take a lot of years, long time, a lot of detail. So we're certainly more than 50 cases right now, first-degree murder only, in our county. They're from years back to currently this year. And if you think of all the work that has to go into, they're important cases. Some of them we're seeking the death penalty on. So a lot of work has to go into them, whether it's pretrial depositions, hearings with the court, planning for trial, and then actually doing a trial. It takes quite a bit of activity. Now, when the coronavirus became a big issue back in March, it, I guess, pretty much out of nowhere stopped everything. The schools closed, the courthouse closed for the most part, and everything was on a standstill for a week or two. But we were quickly working on a plan. How are we going to keep this system going? Because as I said, the criminals didn't stop. The cases still have to be processed. So we were able to work together at the courthouse, defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges. We all have our own roles, but we all have an obligation to try to work together and make sure that we can keep this thing going. And with the help of Sheriff Judd, we were able to start and create what's called a remote courthouse, which is right across the street from the courthouse in Bartow. And it's the old Polk County Sheriff's Administration Building. And it was a lot of empty space in there, and the county went in on so quick, and they constructed remote courtrooms. So people who have business before the court can come in, they can appear with their attorney, socially distanced, before a judge across the street at the courthouse. And it's not as good as being in the courtroom, but it's better than doing it on the phone. So we've had a lot of good success with that. And there's 7 different little courtrooms that they can go into, and you have a judge on the other end of one. And so we can move through some cases pretty quickly. So what does that mean? That means we can have pretrial hearings. We can have cases where the person enters a plea, because you can't enter a plea to a crime over a phone. The judge has to be able to see the person has to be able to see the judge. They have to be fingerprinted there. So we have been able to resolve quite a few of our cases that way. What have we not been able to do? Jury trials for the longest time. That we've just now started those, but that is the critical part of our system that keeps things going. Because when someone's prosecuted for a crime, knowing that ultimately they may have to face a jury, that's that last step of accountability, that they know that the end of their case is coming. And if we don't have the ability to try a case by a jury, then that person has the ability to just delay it and stall it out. So the remote court process has gone pretty well. As you can expect, when you involve humans, there's going to be some interesting experiences. We had one lady who was setting up her court appearance from her house, and she apparently was nervous to make sure that it was set up correctly. She got it set up correctly and then kind of forgot it was on and decided it was time to take a shower. So, that was an unfortunate experience. Somehow they were able to get her attention, but I think it was a little bit too late. We had another person that we're currently prosecuting for driving on a suspended license. And, it's a repeat offense, it's a crime. And he called into his court date behind the wheel of a car. He was driving. So he wasn't thinking that one through. There's an attorney I heard about, not from our circuit, in another area, that she was using her computer Zoom, and she had an interesting sign-on name that you wouldn't want to have appear in court. So, little things like that. We've hit some bumps in the road, but for the most part, we've been able to do that. So jury trials have been, I'm sure some of you had the pleasure of serving on a jury. I know some folks aren't real excited about it, but it's really a critical part of what we do. So normally what we do on Monday, we bring in a couple hundred people, we pack them into a room at the courthouse. Some people have described it as feeling like they've been herded like cattle. But I will tell you that our clerk does a great job of really doing the best she can to move our folks through, because it's a high volume operation. But the idea of packing in several hundred people into a room where you can barely move, those days are over, at least for the long haul, I think. So we've had to find a new way of doing jury trials. And instead of bringing everybody in on Monday and picking them and telling them to come back on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever, we're doing much less in one particular day, and we're doing what's called pick and go. So you'll be called in on a Monday, be a much smaller group. You'll be socially distanced. You'll be brought into the courtroom directly and spread out. There'll be a reserve courtroom where there'll be overflow with a live feed, and we'll select the jury from that group right there. And as soon as we get our jury, we're going to go right away. And we've done this now for about a month. So you come down on Monday, you're going to be selected, and you're going to start hearing evidence, and maybe even if things go well, by the end of the day, reaching a verdict. And then we'll do that again the next day, the next day, and the next day. So it's less people coming in, and it's more efficient. So our concern is making sure that our jurors feel safe, and that when they're there, they're listening to the evidence and they're doing their very important civic duty. They're not worried about getting sick or things like that. Because our concern is obviously our jurors, but it's that we have fair trials. We want the people who are charged with crimes and maybe convicted, that they have a fair trial. We also want our victims, people who are involved in the system, law enforcement, that they feel that the process is fair and everyone's getting a fair trial. So we have those two competing interests, and sometimes the defendant may want his or her whole family in the courtroom. Well, we can't necessarily do that. So we have remote courtrooms and things like that they can listen. So we're having to do the best we can to make accommodations. But things like a murder trial, where if we have a death penalty murder trial, that thing can go on for 4, 5, or 6 weeks. And I don't exactly know how that's all going to work out, but we're going to try our best to make that happen, because when you are having a backlog like we do, these cases are just getting older and older, and cases don't get better with time. So it's in our interest, in our community's interest, to make sure that we try as many cases as we can. So going forward, we're going to start doing some misdemeanor cases. We're using our courthouse in Lakeland and Winter Haven as another way to spread people out and not bringing as many people down to Bartow. And we are just going to be very careful with how we do it. Justice Charles Kennedy, who's from Lakeland, he's our Chief Justice of the whole Florida Supreme Court. And he has really been a statewide leader in setting the courts on the right track to keeping people safe and doing our job. So we can really be proud of the work that he's done. So he has set forth through his committees and through the work that he's done very specific stages that we have to, they call them phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And it's very specific. We're watching the numbers, we're watching the positivity rate, we're watching hospitalizations. And as our county and our state moves through the various phases of this, we adjust things at the courthouse. So as things hopefully will start to improve, the restrictions and things like that will start to go down, and we'll be able to get back to business as normal. So our folks at the courthouse, my employees that work at the state attorney's office, they have been showing up to work at the courthouse pretty much throughout this entire time. There was a couple of week period where the rates were so high that we did have some folks working from home, but my belief is there's no substitute for having people actually in the building working on their cases. So I know we've all had to kind of adjust sometimes to work from home. I'm just not a fan of it. I think that there's too many things that can go wrong. So I want our folks at the courthouse working on these cases, and they've answered the call. So a couple other things I want to talk about. Obviously, 2020 has seen a lot of issues in our country with interaction with law enforcement, folks that are feeling there needs to be some changes in our community, in our criminal justice system. So I really can't speak to things around the country or even things around the state, but I can talk about what's going on here. And I feel really good about things that are going on here. And the reason why is because we have proactive leaders in our community. We have folks like Sheriff Judd and Chief Garcia, who they don't wait for there to be a problem to engage with the community. They don't wait for a crisis to happen to try to build relationships. They're out there every day through, individually and with their officers and with their deputies. And that's been a focus of mine as state attorney. Because if you try to start making friends with people or know what people think when things are blown up, literally or figuratively, you're not going to be very successful. So we have really put a lot of time in to build those relationships and be aware that people have different views of things. So we don't have the problems like they have other places. That's not to say that things are perfect and we'll never have any issues, but I feel real good about our ability to, get things to where they need to be. And one of it is communication. If folks in the community, whether it's a 18-year-old or somebody older or whoever, that don't have many contacts with the criminal justice system, if they don't feel like they have a seat at the table, if they don't feel that they have an ability to figure out what's going on, then they're going to write their own narrative about what they think is going on. So our idea through the city of Lakeland and the sheriff's office and my office and other places is open the doors, let folks come in, let's hear what they have to say. And you know what? I've learned a lot from people just sitting at a table and hearing what they have to say. And they might bring something up that I never thought of. And we've actually been able to act on it. So it's things like that that help us get to where we need to be. And it's reaching out to the community, it's opening the doors, and it's saying, join us in what we're doing. I want nothing more than to have a very diverse court system, a workforce, folks that are in my office that are a reflection of the community. And I know that the city of Lakeland and the sheriff's office and other criminal justice partners are the same way. And I think that the more we do on that front, the better. I hold law enforcement to a very high standard. Truth is absolutely critical. We're all going to make mistakes. My folks make mistakes. Law enforcement's going to make mistakes, but it's acknowledging those mistakes, learning from those mistakes, and trying not to repeat them. And if there's a situation where someone breaks the law or goes beyond what they should do, then they're going to be held accountable. And there's just no question about that. But we can't all focus on the flashpoint, that bad incident that happens when everybody's upset. You got to back away from that point and start looking at how people got to where they are and the perspectives and the communities from which they come. And that is how we can really move forward. And I feel real good about our county and our city, and I think we're going to be good. So just to close with a couple more things. COVID has not stopped the scammers. And as people involved in the business community, you have to be on guard, because when the state and the city are in a crisis and you're worried about your health and your family and all of that, you may let your guard down and you may realize when it's too late that someone has taken advantage of you, whether it's through, early on we had stories of folks going door to door with these phony COVID test kits or, vitamin packs and things like that. And people were scared. They still are, but they were really, because there was a lot of unknown. So we had some scammers in that, or the phone calls where, give your personal information and we'll give you a, free test or whatever it was. So every chance we get, we tell our folks, just be very careful about that. But as people who are involved in business, whether you own a business or you work in a business, we know that our businesses are always under attack by scammers and by criminals. And at the state attorney's office, obviously they come to us, the case comes to us, but at that point it's too late. The scam's already been perpetrated. The business has already lost their money. And, businesses run on such tight budgets. And if they're losing even just a percentage to a fraud or to a crime, that may be enough to put them out of business. So we want to try to get to the folks before the crimes happen. And so we have a series that we go through, and maybe in the future when we get into more traditional times, we can present that to the Lakeland Chamber. But two things that we see a lot, and this is just, I'll close with these. Most of the time when a business is being ripped off, it's coming from inside. It's coming from a trusted bookkeeper, assistant, somebody who has been given probably more authority than they should, and there's no checks and balance. So be very careful. I don't want everybody being paranoid and looking over your shoulder all the time. But when you work in a small business, you become very comfortable and very familiar with the people that you work. You know their birthday, their family members and things like that. So don't fall victim to that person and being too trusting with that. So change up your routine, do spot checks, things like that. And then the other area that we like to talk about are the cyber attacks or the cyber scams. And they're happening all over the place. And it just seems like as soon as we have one figured out, a new one is So the biggest one is when they can enter into your business by never coming into your business. You can have the best locks, the best security and alarm system, but if they can find their way around all of that and get to your business through your computer, it's devastating. So keep your employees trained up on email scams and things like that. So even at the state attorney's office, we send out test emails to our employees, and they get irritated by it sometimes. What are you trying to trick us for? Well, we're just trying to keep everybody on their toes. So, you know, one of the ones that you'll send out is, please click here to re-up your insurance benefits for the year, whatever. And people think, oh my gosh, I need to get my insurance or whatever it is. So just make sure that your employees are very familiar with the threats, because once they get into your system, they can really exploit a lot of things. They can get into your data. They can maybe, you know, get into your bank accounts, and it's a real nightmare to try to back that out. So just a closing pointer on that. Anybody have any questions or anything that you'd like me to address that I haven't? Yeah.
I read that article not too long ago about the children's abuse system and the foster care, and it was shocking to me to realize the extent of the system itself, the backlog, the really the lack, I think, of checking on the foster parents and the abuse that went on for, you know, for years. And how do you address that? I mean, there's a lot of accountability there that has not happened. Meanwhile, how many children are really abused for life? How does that happen?
Yeah. And that is a very frustrating and just terrible thing. And I did read that series, and I think a lot of those instances were from, you know, in the past, but there's no doubt that it probably continues on today. I think we've improved our monitoring of the foster parents. I think that the Heartland for Children organization that we have here in our county is very, very good, and they're good at checking up on the foster parents. But it is so critical that our children have a voice, and that if they're in trouble, that they can get the help that they need. And we've got to be proactive in checking in on these foster situations. One of the things that has been really a bad side effect of COVID was when all the schools were closed down. And I just knew it. Every day there were kids that were trapped in these homes, these abusive situations, because believe it or not, a lot of these cases come to light at the school. So when they show up to school and they make a comment to a friend or a teacher or a guidance counselor, that is sometimes the main event that starts everything happening from being investigated and prosecuted. So I was really very relieved when they were able to get the schools back open and know that our kids are being heard. But foster care parent situation is a very frustrating thing sometimes, and we need good foster parents. So if anybody seriously wants to do that, the more good folks we have doing that, the better it is for the kids. So.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. I want you to just, I guess, emphasize and thank you for what you shared about what I think perception is when it comes to challenges of law enforcement and what's going around the country. I know, as I shared among my colleagues, you know, the things you're seeing in some of the places, it's not happening anymore. Right. So I think it's important to get the word out there. There's an influence I know in mine, and I'm sitting here to make sure that our residents and citizens understand we're not faced with those kinds of situations. As you mentioned, not saying that we're perfect, because we're not. Right. Certainly, there's some things we can work on, work toward, and that's what I know we as a commission players, continue to do. But certainly, this has one, as I hear sometimes saying, well, you check this, check that, because this happened over here, this happened whatever. And I think it's important for us, those of us in business, those of us in neighborhood leaders, to make sure our people know, and I say that we don't have those kind of talents. You may want to make it that way, but it's not happening here. And I'm glad to hear that you, under your operation, know that you can share as you go around, of course, your district area to make sure you understand as well. Secondly, could you speak to, I know you did something that I think with all applaud when it comes to juvenile adjudication, and how is that still being one of his fun thing that I thought was very well done when you brought it to forefront and help support, I guess, some things, especially when you have the juvenile that made a dumb mistake.
Right.
As many of us probably did in our younger years, we just didn't get caught.
Right.
And bringing that program to the forefront, have you seen it being a very supportive situation for our young people?
We've had some really good results with our, we reformed our juvenile prosecution system early on in my first term. And I think part of the problem was there was an attempt to try to treat all juvenile offenders one size fits all. And you just can't do that. You cannot treat the 12-year-old who's shoplifting at Walmart the same way that you do the 17-year-old who has a gun and is shooting at people. They're both kids under the law, but you can't approach them the same way. So my goal was to let's do some early intervention for these kids that are first-time offenders and they're into a mess, whether, you know, if you have a 12 or 13-year-old that's having interaction in a bad way with law enforcement, that's a sign that there's a problem. Maybe there's a problem at home. Maybe they're with the wrong crowd. Maybe there's substance abuse. I don't know. Maybe it's just a bad day. So the goal is to get them the help they need and not necessarily label them as a criminal and have them have a record that now they have to deal with for the next 4 or 5 years when they think about college or the military or a job or something like that. So we worked very closely with law enforcement because what I found is the best way is to get everybody together and to work together. If you go into a situation, you start wagging your finger and saying, this is the way we're going to do it, it's probably not going to be a very successful endeavor. So we got everybody at the table and we came up with a good plan. And we have literally saved thousands of kids since 2017, an arrest record. Has it been perfect? No. Do some of those kids repeat? Yeah, they do. But the goal is to get them the help they need so we don't see them back in the criminal system again. I want them to be out there in school. I want them to eventually be working and paying taxes and being productive. Housing them in the prison is not going to do anybody any good. So we want to stop that cycle that we see. And so it's been very successful, and we have some additional programs we're going to be bringing online, hopefully in the next year. But it's been a good program, and we're looking forward to better things too.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for being here
Sure.
in Lakeland this afternoon and providing us with the access to the state attorney's
Sure.
office. Appreciate it when it's right here in our city. Question about, you mentioned some of the cybersecurity issues. I know I've had a family member, and we've had an employee at the city of Lakeland who fell to social media scams. These individuals pose as if they're creating a relationship with these people, and they end up, bilking them out of sometimes considerable amounts of money. Is that something that can really be, tracked and prosecuted, or knowing that a lot of this stems from overseas, is it something where as soon as we find out that it's related to that kind of social media platform, it's just pretty much a dead end and not much can be done?
Most of the time when a crime like that happens, once they realize it's happened, it's too late. Because the way that they go about, either it's through Bitcoin or through gift cards or whatever, it's virtually impossible to track that person down unless we can determine that it's a local defendant, which is very rare. Usually when our folks are being scammed, it is just simply too late, which is why during non-COVID times, I spend a ton of time in the mobile home communities, the retirement areas, just talking to folks, getting them to start thinking about some of the scams that can happen, and just kind of repeating that, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And it is amazing the types of scams that people are. I could just stand here and list all the different, the older folks will tell me this happened. And it's not just our retirees, it's people of all age, but we try to focus on the highest concentration of potential victims. And so our goal certainly is, if we need to, we'll prosecute if we can, but I want to try to get to our potential victims first before they know it. And so when they get that call or they get that email or that threatening letter or whatever, that they know that it's probably a scam. And part of it is encouraging them, if they get, because there's usually high pressure. It's quick, it's scary, they feel like they got to act right away. It's just trying to get into their mind that they need to just call a timeout and not take action on it, because that's impulsiveness that they rely on. And so I always encourage them, call a family member, call your grandson, call your kid, whatever, get them to step back, because usually once it happens, it's too late. And I think we all can do a good job. If you have a family member that is maybe living on their own, but they're, you know, maybe getting up there in age a little bit, check in with them and say those same things. And maybe we can stop some of these crimes, because once they happen, it's usually too late.
I have to admit that I just about fell prey to one of those, and not too long ago, and I cannot believe that I almost did. And the phone call came from Lakeland Electric. And when I saw the phone number from Lakeland Electric, I had no idea that it was not correct. And you're right, you know, this was a Saturday, they needed a check, they were going to cut off my electricity in the middle of the summer, and I have my 91-year-old mother living with me, and I thought, and only my husband said, this just doesn't sound right. But you talk about high pressure, it's unbelievable. And I realized I almost fell prey. So at that point, I probably should have called you, because I had everybody's phone number there. But it's amazing the amount of time they spend, you know, on a crooked, you know, direction.
Well, and if they do 100 attempts a day and get 2 or 3, they've made some money. I mean, whether, you know, the one I saw last week was an Amazon scam where they send, you know, pretty much everybody has an Amazon account. So they'll send you an email and make it look all official. And they'll say, you know, your Amazon account was used to buy a TV and the protection package, and it was sent to this address in Maryland. And, you know, if this is wrong, click here. I mean, that people panic. They think, oh my gosh, you know, this isn't right. This, I always tell the folks about an email that appeared to come from a bank that I bank at, and it was all official looking. It had the email address, it had the logo, it had all the legal language at the bottom, and it said, you know, your account's been compromised, but don't worry, we can reset it for you with a couple of simple steps. And, you know, they want me to click on that box. Okay, I did not click on that box. If I did, I wouldn't admit it to you, all right, but I did. I didn't. But if I had, they would have wanted my account number, my password, my social security number, I mean, family history, whatever they'll get, they'll get. And then they would compromise my account. So it's just, but they get you in a panic. And, you know, I go around, I talk to folks about scams all the time. But I'll tell you folks, there was a panic in me because I thought, you know, my wife and I, we pay all our bills automatically out of the account. And, you know, what if the account's not compromised? My power is going to get turned off, and, you know, not a good look. So we got to be real careful, even in our own lives, to not let that happen. But it happens.
And there, with the Lakeland Electric issue, which happens weekends and especially holidays. I mean, a holiday tomorrow, we'll probably get hit with some of that, you know, today or tomorrow. They're getting very sophisticated, because what we're finding out is that some of these scammers are even using like a robotic call device. And so when the person answers the phone, it's that robotic, you know, sound telling them to, you know, to remedy the situation, press 1. Well, people are thinking that, you know, the average thief isn't going to have that.
Not that sophisticated, yeah.
So they believe that it's real, and they press 1, and then they are dealing with scam.
And you're sucked in. So the best we can do is we can educate our citizens, and I know that the Lakeland Electric does that, but, you know, every time, I know I don't live in Lakeland, but, you know, I'll get a bill from my power company. They'll say, we're not going to contact you and say this and this. And, you know, if you ever get a call, hang up and call a number that you know. And we really have to get our folks accustomed to the idea that when you get one of those calls, it's probably a scam. And I hate to think that that's where we are, but that's where we are. That's where we are. So they've got to automatically be suspicious of the other line. So the idea of people doing telephone soliciting for charities and all that, I mean, it's pretty much the game is over, because you never know who you're talking about. Now, I want folks to be generous and give to charities, but, you know, you can do that other ways. You can contact them, but it's scary. It really is. So we just need to do the best we can. We have the jury summons scam right out of the court. Now, it's not out of the courthouse, but they make it look like it is. So you get this threatening letter that says you missed jury duty, and the judge is going to lock you up, and you're going to be in big trouble. And people think, oh, I don't know how I missed that summons, but I must have. And next thing you know, they're paying, you know, anything. It's bad. It really is.
Is there such a thing as a true deterrent to certain crimes?
Well, I mean, the true deterrent to a scam crime is to never answer your phone. That's impractical, right? I let it, if you don't know exactly who's calling you, then just let it go to voicemail. And, I always feel that if my wife or my family, my kids need to get a hold of me, they'll track me down eventually. A couple weeks ago, I got a call from myself. Has anybody ever had that happen? Where you look at your phone and it says you're calling yourself? So I said, I don't want to talk to that guy. Okay. Talk to him enough. So those are things that you just got to be careful. But you can't, you got to live your life, and you just got to be as careful as you can. So, well, I appreciate you all having me here. And if I can ever help you in any way, or you want information on what's going on in the court system, you don't have to wait for something like this. Just call me up or email me, and I'll be happy to talk to you about anything that's coming up. Yep.
All right. Thank you, sir. Briefly, I actually started in juvenile justice right out of college in Bartow. So I'm glad to hear, because I got to know too many kids that were coming back for some simple things because they would violate their probation or their terms. So anyway, it's great to hear about some of those changes with juvenile justice. Corey came in. Do you have anything to say? Nope. Well, thank you. Yes. Good to see you again. So as I said, this will be edited and we'll put it up on our YouTube channel if you want to send it over to anyone. It was a lot of great information, so thank you. In closing, we had 2 sponsors, and I want to call our second sponsor up, Mr. Martin from the Martin Law Group. And he's going to just tell you a little bit about his firm, and then we have a little token of appreciation for our state attorney.
Well, good morning. I'm standing here like this temporarily to prove to the people in my house that I actually wear a mask. In my house, wearing a mask is a really big deal. I'll try to be brief. The first Martin lawyer was Stephen P. Mallory, was born 200 years ago. And after an arduous past, went to Key West and has a square named after him. That being said, my dad had 6 kids and 5 of us have law degrees. My dad, Snow Martin, was a lawyer here for a long time, and his great uncles were, and great grandfather, and the way we all go. But let me just say, my older brother, Snow Martin, is a real estate lawyer. He's primarily trustee of the Blanton Foundation. I do agricultural law. Eliana Perez was kind enough to come working with me. We were down with mango farmers in Pahokee last week, and then we've been to Loretta, south of Sebring, to toxic chemicals on citrus. We've been across Hope County on the drought affecting citrus. So I've had actually COVID. I've actually probably participated in some method or manner helping farmers primarily across America in 37 states. And I've also had the opportunity to go before many, many courts of law, including the Supreme Court of the United States. That being said, my younger brother, Steve, is an elder lawyer, but let me quickly digress. The prominent people in our family are not the guys. The prominent people are the women. Starting in reverse, Ellie was kind enough to come work with me. My older sister, Cecilia, went to law school when she was approximately 40 years of age, came home, became a circuit judge, became Judge Moore, and became associate pastor at First Pres. But the beat goes on, but most people don't realize that I'm sitting here talking about Martin Law Office, but Brian, I didn't agree to do this because of Martin Law Office. I agreed to do it because I'm a stand-in for someone else who appreciates the work that Brian and his folks and Corey and the clerk of the court have done in fighting COVID by acting responsibly, where in many situations she faces people who don't act responsibly. So when I left the house this morning, she said to me, you make sure that you tell Mr. Haas and the people at the courthouse that I appreciate what they've been doing. And they've acted responsibly, and this thing is growing. I have had a second row seat to COVID. Phone, it's 7 days a week. It started in February. Your local healthcare people have had no rest. They work and they're not complaining. So anyway, when Joy and I were married 30 years ago, she decided to keep her maiden name was Dr. Joy Jackson. I would keep Martin. This way we don't have masked we don't have masked people picketing our house. So enough said. So I'm actually here for Dr. Jackson, and she wanted to say how much she appreciates people like Corey and Brian and people in the courthouse working with her to try to at least contain this unfortunate series of events that takes place in our community. Enough said. Well, Brian is coming up. I want to also say that my brother Snow was in the state attorney's office in the 50s. I was there in the 70s. And Brian was kind enough to have my daughter Rachel intern 2 years ago. She graduated from Stetson in May. And it's a real honor to have had my daughter in the state attorney's office, because I wrote him a letter and I said, your office has camaraderie and you have integrity. And I appreciate you taking care of Joy, our youngster. Anyway, this says certificate of appreciation presented to Brian Haas by the Lakeland Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're gonna use the panorama.
Yeah.
We can't have Dr. Jackson.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Well, in closing, I just want to thank our sponsors, Family Elder Law and Martin Law, and then, of course, Mr. Haas for taking time out of his schedule to join us today and provide that great information. So with that, yes, it'll be on YouTube once I figure out how to edit. No, we'll do that. But anyway, yeah, so we'll get this up if you want to share it. And then one other shameless plug for the, not shameless, I guess, but plug for the chamber. Our last event of the year is our Scramble, the Monday after Thanksgiving, if I'm correct. And what better week to check it out than Masters? Usually we can't say it because Masters is usually in April, but you know, might as well plug the Scramble now. So anyway, if you're interested, just go to our website and check that out. So with that, everyone be safe, and we'll talk to you guys soon.